retirement. My colleague Carl is over here. He's going to be running my slides, and we're working together on our 5 keys to retiring fearlessly presentation. So, does everybody remember March of 2020 and where they were, what they were doing? Start of the pandemic. It was worst month in the stock market since 2008, and a lot of people thought, what's going on? What if this happens again, either right before I'm retired, or what if the market never recovers? Because during the early part of 2020, it was really scary. Nobody knew what was going to happen. You might be concerned about those kind of risks and wonder, am I going to be ready for retirement as the day gets closer and closer? Let me answer that question with a story. So these aren't their real names, but a couple named Terry and Chris had about $25,000 in savings, and everything else was in their 401ks and IRAs. Obviously, Chris was worried. They were saving as much as they could, but they were afraid that it wouldn't be enough. They often talked about what they'd do if they ran out of money or if the market crashed again. As you can probably imagine, and maybe you've experienced it yourself, this creates a lot of stress in your life. They also discovered, just thinking about it, that they had an income gap in their retirement planning, and they were going to be short about $10,000 a year of income in retirement. Between what their guaranteed income would provide and what they needed to fulfill their needs, wishes, and wants. So fast forward to today, Terry and Chris are on solid ground. Now they have close to $10,000. They have closed that $10,000 income gap. But as Terry put it, we feel really confident. We have a plan in place. And when the market swings dramatically and our friends are freaking out, we feel okay because we know our plan is built for shifts in the market. As a matter of fact, not only do they no longer have the stress of worrying about retirement, they actually can spend money on the things they enjoy today. So how did this happen? How did they go from being worried about the future to being confident they could get where they wanted to? So we're going to talk a little bit about just unlocking your retirement. And then keep in mind that this is not an exhaustive list. This is going to be just kind of a high-level view. And really what I want to do is just leave you with some confidence that you can reach your goals and that you'll be able to achieve them with some steps that you can take. So I found that many people who have attended this workshop has asked questions like these on the slide. If you find yourself worrying about the same things, don't worry. During our time today, we'll talk about how you can be more confident in your retirement plans. We'll understand how your savings can continue to grow in tax-advantaged ways, and gain some strategies for protecting yourself and the people that you love from some of the what-ifs in life. So some of the things that may happen that are unforeseen but are often negative. So I guess the first question would be just kind of to ask everybody here, how are you feeling about retirement, either if you're approaching retirement or you're in retirement, just the amount of income and needs that you have and if that'll be met? Fairly confident, not that confident?
Fairly confident.
Okay. I think there's no way to know. Everyone can, I think the most you can say is I feel fairly confident because life is a mystery and things happen. And we do our best to plan, but it doesn't always, work out the way we think. My role here today is to, get you thinking about some things, help you make some more informed decisions about your financial strategy, and then where to go as next steps. I guess a little bit about me and my background and why I do what I do. I've been with Thrivent for 3 years. Prior to that, I worked for a large investment management firm here in Denver. And so I really worked with the investment side of things for a long time. And my role was to talk to financial advisors around the country about using our mutual funds and using our investments. And what I found is all that's well and good, but when it comes to actual people, some of that stuff is really not really their concern. Their concern is more, how am I going to answer the 2 questions that are important? And that's, will I make it, and what are my financial blind spots? And investments can be part of that, but that's a much, much wider conversation. And so that's why I'm really passionate about what I do in helping people plan for retirement, because it isn't always just about picking the right investments or designing a portfolio. So a little bit about Thrivent too is we're unique in that we're a not-for-profit. We're a Christian membership organization. We started in the early 1900s as part of the kind of an offshoot of working with Lutherans, providing insurance and benefits for Lutherans. But about 8 years ago, Thrivent opened up their membership to anybody who's willing to say, hey, I'm a Christian, and gives us a little bit of a unique presence in the marketplace. We are a Fortune 500 company, but we just kind of fly under the radar because we're a non-for-profit, and until really recently, we just haven't really done that much advertising. So let's go into kind of the 5 keys for retiring fearlessly here. And the first key is going to be guaranteed income. So when thinking about your income in retirement, you've probably asked yourself, how will I have enough? How will I know that I have enough? And that's most people's biggest worry. It'd be great to retire knowing that you are going to have enough income to last you for your entire lifetime, no matter how long that is. One thing you can do is to ensure that, or help ensure that, is to provide yourself with some sources of guaranteed income. And when planning for your retirement, the starting point is to compare your guaranteed lifetime income to your level of desired income. So most people want to have at least the expenses they define as needs to be met for life. And then what about your wants and your wishes and your desire to give? Is that going to be also provided by the income that you can generate in retirement? These 4 categories can determine the amount of guaranteed income you'll manage in retirement. Think of it as baking a cake. Baking a cake starts with the right ingredients. That's your needs, like paying for housing, groceries, utilities, and then, what's a cake without frosting? So technically, you don't need frosting to enjoy it, but think of the frosting as your wants. Those are things like travel, going out to eat, tickets to a show, going on vacation, and then the last part is different for everybody. It's just how to decorate it. Do you want to put sprinkles? Do you want to put little roses or whatever? But those are your wishes. Those are kind of your longer-term goals that go into retirement. And that might be, bigger trips, might be buying an RV, might be buying a second home, might be some large purchase that you're looking forward to. And then finally, when you're done, it's time to eat the cake. So it's more fun when you generously share your dessert. So a lot of people have legacy planning that they want to include in their retirement plan. And that's what happens after I pass. If I have money left over, or if I can use my money to leverage a gift to the people or organizations that I really care about. One other note on guaranteed income. Let's look at the other side of the expenses of the equation, that's expenses. Knowing the level of income you want in retirement comes from understanding your post-retirement budget. One big piece of many budgets is housing costs. Do you have a mortgage? If you do, how many more years or how many months of payments do you have left? Could a refinance to a shorter term, like 10 or 15 years, make sense? That shorter term can help you eliminate an expense in retirement, can decrease the amount of money that you need as far as guaranteed income goes. Loan interest rates can also be similar. I know obviously we're in a really low interest rate environment, and most people have probably taken advantage of that in terms of refinancing, but if you haven't, it's a great time to look at that. Lower your expenses. And then find out if you can just save money or move closer to your financial goals by refinancing other loans or paying off loans faster while the interest rates are low. And that's a good thing to do with a banker, a mortgage provider. Some of those folks are great resources. So what are going to be some of your sources of retirement income? Maybe you have pensions. A lot of people, especially in Colorado, seem to have rental income, as real estate's been a popular investment over the last few years. IRAs or 401ks from your employer. If you have any annuities, those provide some guaranteed income. But those all may be subject to some different risks according to what's happening in the market or just other factors. So let's talk about one source of guaranteed income that most everybody's entitled to, and that's Social Security. Has anybody ever looked at their SSA.gov account and seen kind of their projected, here's what you're going to receive as a Social Security payment? If you haven't, it's really easy. You just go on the SSA.gov website and enter your Social Security and a couple other pieces of information, and they'll be able to provide that for you. So Social Security for most people is going to be a big chunk of their guaranteed income in retirement. Obviously, your benefit depends on how long you've worked and how much you've earned, and then when you choose to begin to take your Social Security. And probably a lot of us have heard the phrase full retirement age. Is everybody familiar with that? So, you know, the number kind of has crept up over the years. It used to be 65 is when you were eligible for your full retirement. Now it's 67, and that'll probably continue to go up as life expectancy goes up and Social Security Trust Fund goes down. So, you know, that's a great time to have a conversation about Social Security benefits, because there's a lot of different strategies you can take. Waiting until full retirement age to get the most monthly benefit maybe doesn't always make the most sense. So everybody's situation is unique, and it's good to kind of look at the numbers and look at your goals and needs, and sometimes it's better to take Social Security a little bit earlier and maybe have that paid out over a longer number of years than a higher amount over a shorter number of years. So every piece of your retirement income gets you closer to meeting your needs and then your wants and wishes. So if you want to know more about Social Security, that's something I can definitely help you out with, kind of looking at your unique situation and figuring out best strategies for taking Social Security's payments. So next, we're going to talk about the second key. And if we remember the story of Terry and Chris, you know, here's something that they did. As part of their strategy, they created different buckets of money that had different levels of exposure to the market. So these buckets are created by understanding and applying key 2, which is protection from volatility. The best part is that, you know, these folks aren't unique. This is a strategy that anybody can use. So how do you protect yourself, you know, should there be another market drawdown? That's a key question. You know, I don't know if you have a pen and paper in front of you, but just think about where your assets are invested currently. You know, if you own stocks, if you own mutual funds, if you have 401k or IRA, you know, there's probably some sort of investment vehicle those are put into, whether it's generally mutual funds or something else. And you know, these are all going to be potential income streams for you in retirement. But you know, just figure out how much volatility those are exposed to. Like if there was a market crash, how much risk are you at right now? So it would be ideal to have guaranteed income cover your entire desired income in retirement, at least the base need for kind of baking the cake. But it's not always realistic. That's where your assets come in. And that's your 401k, your IRAs, any rental property that you have. You know, you may need those assets working for you in retirement. And the risk you need to account for there is market volatility. It can be really unnerving when you're in the accumulation phase, when you're saving for retirement, when you're putting money in your 401k. But if you're in retirement and all of your assets are invested in the market, it can be devastating if that were to occur, if there were to be a market downturn. If you think about 2008 and the Great Recession, you know, many retirees had too many market assets in the market, and the nest egg they were sitting on and trusting to provide guaranteed income, you know, it went down 40% if they were invested in all of the stock market in 2008. So for a lot of people, that meant they had to scale back their retirement, either getting rid of some of those wishes and wants, or just, you know, really take a hit in terms of lifestyle. So to limit our risk, we want to create some near-term, intermediate-term, and longer-term buckets, essentially. So near-term income is your kind of safety net. excuse me, to weather market volatility. So this is a bucket of assets to basically fill your gap between the guaranteed income that you have and your income goal. So it's really kind of a 3 to 7 year time frame. Basically 3 to 7 years of your gap that you have set aside. And the two rules with the near-term bucket are it's invested with the aim to preserve principal, and it should be invested in lower risk, easily accessible accounts. So this would be like a cash account even, or a CD, or a money market account, so that you can have more of a short-term outlook on, and you can get to rather easily. But it's not going to move up and down with the market. So that if there wasn't a market correction, you could take money out of that bucket, and it wouldn't have gone down really much. You won't make much here, but that's not really the function of those investments. The market should not affect that money. So market volatility certainly is unnerving, and especially if you're in retirement. But investing in the stock market is really one of the only ways that has been shown historically to outpace inflation. So you don't know how long you're going to be retired because you don't know how long you're going to live, and you don't know how much things are going to cost in the future because, as we've seen, obviously inflation can really increase. So you want that money working, and you want to give it the most potential to grow. So definitely have some exposure to stocks, even as you're retired. I think the big thing that people kind of don't account for is the fact that for most of us, if we retire in our mid-60s, late 60s, even early 70s, is that we might have 20 or more years in retirement. And over 20 years, the market will have probably a couple cycles, but over a 20-year period, you're going to come out ahead in the stock market. So having some long-term investments in stocks can really help your retirement in terms of being able to guarantee you don't outlive your money. The third key is inflation, and that's obviously a topic that has been in the news lately. If your kind of near-term bucket protects against market volatility, and your long-term bucket helps protect against inflation. So you think about how much you paid for like your first car. I mean, I paid $10,000 for a 1992 Honda Civic when I was in college, and that was a lot of money. And to get like an entry-level vehicle now, it's $30,000, and that was only 25 years ago. So again, you think about how long your retirement could be, and the potential impact of inflation on that retirement. Over 20, 30 years, inflation can really eat up a lot of your purchasing power. So to account for that, we want to have a bucket that we think of as providing the best potential for growth, being able to accept some of the risk that comes along with that growth, and that there might be years that you lose money. But because you have that short-term bucket, if you do lose money in a year or two, you can take money out of that bucket and let the money in the longer-term bucket come back as the market recovers. So the goal is to hedge against inflation, mitigate the risk of outliving your savings. So your buckets are near-term, enough money mostly available, so you don't have to tap into your investments to cover expenses during like a downturn in the market. The growth bucket, that's going to have the potential to grow over a long period of time. That'll kind of buffer against some of the risks of market volatility and inflation. And then the guaranteed income bucket, which is kind of that bucket that we talked about, Social Security, pensions, anything else that's more guaranteed that you can count on, not really going up or down based on the market. So here's a question. If you could pick your own tax bracket, would you do it? Yes? The way you withdraw from your retirement accounts definitely allows you to hedge against losing control of your tax bracket. And that's kind of the next key, is to pick your own tax bracket. So the biggest thing I think people underestimate is when saving for retirement is the impact of taxes on their retirement savings. For most people, the bulk of their assets are in things like 401ks or IRAs that they've rolled over from an old employer that went into those investments before they were taxed. And that was a huge advantage as you're employed to be able to do that. But then when you're retired and the time comes to take the money out, you're going to have to pay the taxes. So there's kind of three ways that you can think of that. Is you can take your retirement income from the tax now, tax later, or tax never options. And really there's a number of ways to do that. Tax now assets are investments or savings that you've already paid taxes on. So think of like money sitting in a bank account. If you put money into stocks or other investments in a brokerage account that's not really a retirement account, if you take the money out, you'll pay the taxes on the growth of that. Your checking account is obviously taxed now. Tax later is things like your 401k or IRA. The contributions weren't taxed going in, but any growth is taxed coming out. And then tax never is things that you will never be taxed on. So either because you paid the taxes on them, or they just generate income that's not taxable. So like a Roth IRA is the best example. Money taken out of a Roth is taken out tax-free. Municipal bond income is tax-free as well. And so you have some options there. Also cash value life insurance, the cash value in a life insurance policy. You can take that money out, it's tax-free. So there's some definite advantages to structuring retirement savings with some life insurance that could be accessed at a later date. So, one of the keys to remember is basically you can't touch your retirement savings until you reach age 59 and a half. And then at age 72, you're going to be required to take money out of those traditional IRAs or 401ks in the form of what's called retired minimum distributions. So between about age 59 and a half and age 72, you have some control over when you take those withdrawals and how you can be tax efficient with taking those withdrawals, moving them from that tax later bucket into that tax never bucket. And that's an area where working with a financial advisor can really pay a lot of dividends. So the last thing is protecting against the what ifs, and that's the idea that a lot of financial strategies are based on our dreams and our desires and our wants and our wishes, but we also have to prepare for some of the negatives or bad outcomes that are possible in our lives, and that's things like, what if we get sick? What if we get hurt? What if nobody knows when they're going to die? What if you die earlier than you thought? If that happens, especially if you're married, you could as a couple, if one spouse passes away, then you might lose that Social Security benefit. Your pensions might be gone if they were tied to one spouse. Your tax situation definitely changes. You're not filing jointly, you're filing singly, and that can really impact your tax bill every year. So some of the things that you need to think about, while investments are a big part of your retirement mix, a retirement strategy that includes protection is important as well. And I talked a little bit about life insurance. Obviously, the big benefit of life insurance is that death benefit, but there's ways to structure life insurance to provide a lot of benefits while you're living as well, in the form of the cash value in the policy, or in the form of the tax efficiency of the vehicle. So if you're married and dependent on somebody's retirement income, if that person dies first, how would your income needs change? That's something you need to think about. How would your income sources change? What would the effect be on your tax bill? I've witnessed personally a lot of real examples of how life insurance can have a positive impact for families. So if you don't have a good life insurance plan as part of your retirement strategy, it's something that's really important to think about. And here's something that I'll kind of share as I think is useful. Life insurance allows you to kind of fill some of those buckets. You can use the proceeds to fill the near term or the growth bucket that we talked about, so you can take that tax-free death benefit and put it in the bank and live off that. You can invest part of it and use that investment income to fill the gap. It can also be used for the people and places that are important to you to provide a legacy after you're gone. And then lastly, just kind of touch on long-term care insurance. It's something that, again, statistically about 3 out of every 4 people will need some form of long-term care insurance at some point in their life, or long-term care at some point in their life. So insuring against that expense can be critical to your plan. Especially if you have legacy plans or have goals to leave a legacy to your family. Long-term care is one of the fastest ways to really draw down your assets in retirement, because on average in Colorado it costs about $10,000 a month to stay in a long-term care facility, so $120,000 a year. A lot of people think, oh, I'll self-insure because I'll have a large enough retirement nest egg that if I need long-term care, I'll just pay it out of my IRA or my 401k. But very quickly that can be exhausted. And in the worst case scenario, if you exhaust all your assets, you'll have to rely on Medicaid and a Medicaid long-term care facility. And generally, those are just not as ideal as something that's going to be more expensive. So,
can I ask a question?
Yes.
On the long-term care insurance, I've had it for about 13 years. When you meet with clients, if they have the assets to do that, do you recommend that? And my planner had recommended it as soon as I could get it, because a lot of places won't insure you if you start getting chronic conditions, and
right.
It's also a lot cheaper when you're younger.
Yeah, long-term care is cheaper when you're younger. Obviously, your health is as good as it's going to be typically the younger that you are. And long-term care insurance is actually, one of the harder types of insurance to qualify for from an underwriting standpoint. So yeah, take advantage of it.
Would it be a certain age though isn't it like 60 or 62 when you start to invest in that?
It depends. I think, sometimes in your 50s it can make sense. The thing about long-term care is it's kind of use it or lose it in the sense that, well, if you don't ever need it, you've kind of thrown away those premiums essentially for years and years and years. So there can be a balance of having enough long-term care insurance to meet the need if there was a need, but also thinking about other ways to insure or to provide a bucket of money for long-term care insurance. So a lot of times for younger people with long-term care insurance, I say buy a smaller amount that's going to inflate over time, because you can buy it with like a rider that inflates 2, 3, 5% a year. So you're gonna basically pay for the inflation, and it'll provide a benefit. And then use like a cash value life insurance policy that you can pay into for a lot of years and build up some cash value. And then that cash value can kind of be another source of a pot of money for long-term care if you need it. But everybody's situation is unique, so it'd be a good conversation to have, and I'm happy to have it about what makes the most sense. Because again, if you have enough retirement assets, maybe you can self-insure. If not, maybe there's some strategies that can save you money and make sure you're not spending more money on long-term care insurance than you need, but that you'll have peace of mind about it going forward.
And just to
Yeah.
interject there, I think that's a really good question about, hey, am I just throwing money away if I'm never going to use it? Brian had this, what was the statistic about 3 in 4 people potentially using long-term care
Yeah.
insurance? Another way to think about it as well, you have homeowners insurance. You ever plan to use it?
Hopefully not.
We all hope not.
Right.
It's a little more closer to home with what just happened with the fires.
Yep,
We hope to never use it. Do we still have it?
yes.
So you gotta balance that, but that's why it's worth having the conversation to see if it makes sense, or if it doesn't make sense, or what level makes sense, rather than just yes or no, and having a professional conversation about it, just to understand it at that higher level.
Well, life
Well, I
insurance
think-
is similar, right? So we get life insurance and sometimes we don't ever use it. The policy runs out or whatever.
I-
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where Brian's talking too about, you got term life insurance, which most folks are familiar with, then cash value or permanent life insurance. How do we diversify between these things? Because you're right, almost 97% of term life policies never pay out, but it's there for that catastrophic event. Somebody passes away in a car accident, passes away unexpectedly. That's what it's for, as opposed to the cash value life insurance, which potentially can be used to pay for some of that long-term care as a part of a bigger strategy. And that's where we come in as holistic financial advisors and say, okay, what are all the different pieces to this puzzle? Let's make sure that you're understanding how all these pieces fit together rather than just this piece or just this piece.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, is really what we want to help you do is solve for X, essentially. So everybody's goals in retirement are different. Everybody's desire to retire or when to retire is different. Some people, they want to keep working because they enjoy working and they love their job and they never want to really stop, or maybe I'll just do it less. Other people are like, you know what, I work hard, I've worked hard for a long time, and I just want to not work anymore. And so that's those are different conversations, but it's finding out, okay, what are my goals, what are my needs, wants, wishes, and then where am I at now from a saving standpoint, asset standpoint, liability standpoint, and then how much income am I going to generate from Social Security or other guaranteed income sources, and then that gap based on your time of when you want to retire, your needs for retirement income, is what Carl and I help people figure out, so that you have a plan in place, whether whether you're 10 years from retirement, 15 years from retirement, or even in retirement, so that you have that peace of mind that not only do I have a plan in place, but if something were to happen, whether that's I have to use long-term care, I have a job loss earlier than I thought, and I may have to retire a little bit earlier, or whatever some of the risks are, that my plan is good, my plan is solid, and that I'm going to be able to generate the income that I need in retirement, that I don't have that fear of outliving my retirement income. And I think one of the things that people think about when it comes to to the solving for retirement income is just, am I going to be a burden on my family at some point, and just having that peace of mind that you're not going to be, and you're going to be able to actually even leave a legacy to the people and places that are important to you after your passing. So I think we talked about kind of 5 different things today: guaranteed income, protecting yourself from volatility, not outliving your savings, some ways to maybe be efficient with your taxation in retirement, and then kind of that last piece of protecting against some of the what ifs out there. So those are kind of the 5 keys that we think are critical in coming up with a retirement plan. And, you know, that's can be overwhelming. But we have some resources here at Thrive that are available that can kind of help you with that in concert with maybe talking to one of us. And that's an assessment tool called Income Match. And basically it'll kind of help you identify your investor profile. So, you know, what's your risk tolerance? And then help you see what allocations of guaranteed long-term and liquid assets might be right for you. So that's a great way to get started. Is just saying, is kind of getting the baseline. Where am I at now? How much risk do I want to take, or am I willing to take? And then, you know, what sources of income can I rely on in retirement? My Social Security, my investments, any life insurance that I have, things like that. So we've got some time here, so I want to open up to questions just on any of these topics related to retirement income, market volatility, life insurance.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On RMD.
Yes.
I know they recently changed the law to up it from 70.5 to 72. When you have to start, there's a formula
Yep.
about how much has to come out. What do you say about how you deal with the money? Mine will probably be taxed. I know they want, the federal government wants their taxes, that's
Yeah.
what they have you do in RMD, but is it, once you get the income, is it recommended to spend that or reinvest it? Because you've already paid taxes, you reinvest it, when you get investment income, they're taxing it again.
Yeah, so a couple things, like one of the things that you can consider is obviously before you have to take RMDs is taking as much money out of those accounts as you can and putting it somewhere that's not going to be taxed. So a lot of times that's where it makes sense to buy a permanent life insurance policy and pay the premiums out of your IRA that's going to be subject to RMD. And then you draw down the amount of money in your IRA that's subject to RMD, and you've moved it into this cash value life insurance, and that cash value is another bucket of tax-free income for you. So
That's where these three pictures kind of, Brian's talking about moving from that middle one, tax later to tax never again.
Does it require a certain amount of years in like the life insurance
So
thing?
you can do, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to structure, you know, life insurance. You can just do it like a 7-pay. So I'll pay it over 7 years, or I'll pay it over 10 years, or I'll pay it over 20 years, and then I won't pay any more premiums. You can do a single premium, or you can just do lifetime worth of premiums. It all depends on, you know, your whole financial picture. But then to kind of answer your second question about, so I take money out of my accounts because I have RMDs. Now I don't need it for income. What do I do with that money? Well, it doesn't make much sense to invest it back into, you know, like another tax later type of strategy, because you're going to still pay taxes on money you've already been taxed on. So I do a lot of like what are called non-qualified accounts with that money. So you know that money will be will be able to grow, but won't be taxed. So like you could put it into a variable annuity, and that'll grow, and the growth won't be taxed. Or you can look at like tax-free investments like municipal bonds that will. You can buy municipal bonds. Those bonds will pay some interest, and that interest is always tax-free. So then you basically generated more tax-free income for yourself off that RMD. And then if you need to, you can just sell the bonds.
Withdraw your taxable account, maybe $7,000, and put it into a Roth.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that. With the Roth IRA, you know, obviously you have the lower contribution limits of $7,000 a year. So
Yeah.
if your RMD is higher than that, you can't do that always. You do have to have earned income to put money into a Roth. So for a lot of people in retirement, it's not really a viable strategy because they're not working any longer and earning income.
Well, it has to be earned income? What if you
Yes.
inherit some money? You can't put that into a
No.
Roth? You can't put it into a Roth?
You have to have earned income.
So no transfer for 401ks to Roth unless you,
Yeah.
if you already have it in your, it's not earned income.
Well, if you have it in a 401k and you wanted to convert into a Roth, so say you retire, you have a 401k from work, and you're like, okay, I have a choice. I can roll this 401k into an IRA. I can basically roll it over into a traditional IRA, and you know nothing really changes. The account value stays the same. I can choose new investments, whatever. Or you can take that money out of your 401k, convert it to a Roth, and pay the taxes on that whole conversion. It generally makes more sense to convert it over a series of years, because you know depending on how much money you have in your 401k, you know if it's a few $100,000 or more, converting that to a Roth, that conversion counts as income for the year. So all of a sudden your earned income for the year you convert, if your 401k was $500,000, you'd be in that highest tax bracket. So you want to like convert up to the level where if you converted one more dollar, you'd be in the next highest tax bracket. And you know that's something we can help you figure out. But that way you're paying the least amount of taxes on it as you convert, and then over 5-10 years you convert it all into this tax never bucket, and then hopefully then when you retire it's all in that bucket, which is a huge advantage.
So as you all are realizing, tax efficient strategies are a huge part of your retirement strategy. And so tax strategy is what we talk about. And tax advice is a tax accountant. So we don't provide tax advice, but it's strategy on how to work tax bracket.
And it's interesting because my background, I work for, like I said, a pretty large investment management firm, and I thought about investments and generating returns for people, and how can we generate the most return? Well, if I can move money from here to here, I've essentially saved you whatever the tax bracket you're in retirement, because I think you think about, oh, I have this retirement nest egg that I've put into my 401k for all these years, and you look at the account value in that, and it's whatever the amount is. Well, really, you're going to end up paying a quarter to more in taxes. So why not save yourself the tax bill, and then you don't have to be as aggressive with your investments. The other thing too is we're at a point now where taxes are as low as they've ever been historically, and we're in a situation where that tax law is going to be changed, and we've printed trillions of dollars in the last couple of years, and we have obviously different administrations with different philosophies around taxation. So if you have the ability to convert some of that money to a Roth, right now, when your tax bracket is probably as low as it's going to be for the foreseeable future, take advantage of that now instead of waiting until they up the bracket, and it's going to be a more costly conversion from a tax standpoint. So
We don't know which way the tax bracket will go, but as a bonus slide, if you think of the slide over here, the structure, the brackets have gone this way, whereas the national deficit has gone this way. So if taxes were to change, which way do you think they would go, up or down? So that's why getting that money into that tax never again bucket will give you some peace of mind. As a part of your overall strategy, it's still good to take advantage of 401k, especially employer matches. That's 100% return if your employer's matching.
Anything else?
That's part of what we'll talk about in the next session as well, is legacy planning. And Brian was mentioning with the life insurance, giving to the people, places, or I think like you mentioned, politicians, you know, they're required minimum distributions. The politicians are lined up to get a cut of your money. So how can we move your money from that tax later to that tax never bucket to avoid having to take RMDs and pay tax on them?
Let's just go back and define R&D.
RMD?
Yeah.
So it stands for required minimum distributions, and at age 72, the IRS will look at all of the assets that you have in this kind of tax later bucket. So if you have 401ks, traditional IRAs, and they'll say, okay, we never got our tax receipts for any of that money, and now it's time to collect. And based on the amount in those type of accounts and your age, there's a mathematical calculation that the IRS will say, okay, this is your required minimum distribution for this year, and it's a dollar amount, and you can take it out of one account, you can take it out of multiple accounts, but at the end of the day, you have to take that money out of those accounts and pay the taxes on them. One strategy a lot of people use is with those RMDs doing what's called a QCD, which is a qualified charitable distribution. So you can take your RMD, you never take possession of it, you send it to your church, a charity, any not-for-profit, and then you've basically satisfied your RMD, and you've provided a charitable gift to an organization that's important to you. So it's a way to kind of, you were going to give to charity anyway that year, so I had to take this money out, and I'll just put it directly into
And that starts at 72, age 72?
at age 72, yep.
And there's tax benefits with doing that as well, where you're saving some of the taxes by giving through that qualified charitable distribution.
Because normally the RMD that you would take out, if you had to take an RMD of $10,000, that would count as $10,000 of taxable income for you in that calendar year. Whereas if you use a QCD, it doesn't count as income for you. It just is going directly to the charity.
So we work with a lot of folks who tithe, who are giving to their church anyway, and they're pretty happy when we tell them about this qualified charitable distribution. And then they've got that much more that they didn't pay taxes on, and they're still tithing, just another way. So we've still got a couple minutes here before the next session starts at 10:30. It's about 10:24. But happy to answer any other questions till the next session starts at 10:30, but appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
Why did you say that term life only pays 3% of the time?
That's just a statistic.
Because most
of the time you've got a 10, 20, or 30-year term policy. It's like renting.
Right.
So if somebody's 30 and they take out a 30-year term policy and that goes to age 60, statistically I'll probably live past age 60.
Got it.
But
Because I
if-
think our policy goes into our 90s.
I do
So
have
I
a
just
long-term
assumed
care
that
I have to tell
we
you,
would
I
probably end up not getting to that point.
And then there are strategies around that as well, with often some term products have a conversion feature where you can convert some or all of that term death benefit amount into a permanent policy that would last through the end of your life. Now with the term policy that goes into your 90s, you just have to look at the benefits versus the cost, because term is cheap typically.
It is.
But it doesn't have a cash value that permanent life can build. So it's figuring out in your life insurance bucket what makes sense to diversify in that bucket based on what you can pay into it. And that answer is different for everybody. It's not one size fits all.
Right.
which is where it gets fun for us to say, okay, we're dealing with this. We heard these were your goals.
Mhm.
Here's a couple different roads to get there. What do you wanna do?
Sure, sure, okay, thanks.
Yeah, great question. Thanks for running the video.
Oh
That
my
worked out
gosh,
Pretty good.
I've worked very hard at it all
Yeah.
session.